You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Greetings to all of you listening around the world, and a warm welcome as we bring you another edition of Answers for the Family radio show. I'm your guest host today, and as the announcement said earlier, your host, Alan Cardoza, which is my good buddy, my friend, will not be here with us today. Anyway, about myself, besides being a former co-host for this show, I played in the NFL, the National Football League, for the Los Angeles Rams and the Oakland Raiders. I'm also an ordained minister, and I'm very active in many charities that involve helping children. And according to Alan, I always like to call him Mr. Cardoza because I want him to feel older than myself. Kind of a running joke we have amongst us. And as he's listening, he's probably not, but when he hears the taped version, he'll definitely get a laugh because he is much older than me. Anyway, as he says, this makes me the perfect fit to host today's show in his absence. Well, we'll see. Well, as many of you may be aware or may not be aware, Mr. Cardoza Allen is an international detective. And he was called out of state on a case and learned recently that he, was not going to be able to make it here this morning into the studio. And so he reached out to me and see if I could host the show, and as he thought I would be a great fit. But we wish him all the success while he's out there. Been knowing Alan for over 30 years, and I know that the work that he does as a international detective is some really good works. Well, we are looking for some show ambassadors who will forward at least one of our shows to their social media group and to someone you know who can benefit from a particular subject. All you can do is go on to the website and see all the shows that are archived there and pass them along to some friend or someone in your social media group. We truly appreciate it. And this is another way that we can make a positive difference in the lives of others. And that's what this show is about. It's about having an opportunity that listeners, that we can impact lives. We can make a difference in the lives of families and communities, not just locally, nationally, internationally. Each week, this show will address issues such as locating your runaway teen, family crisis intervention, building self-esteem, dealing with addictions, and so much more. We've been very fortunate to meet and to work with some of the top professionals in many of the helping fields and skilled authors who are working to make this world a better place for all of us. Yes, and our guest today, I'm excited to have a chance to interview our guest. His name is Danny Sales, and I'm going to give an introduction in just a minute. But it's going to be, for you listeners, this is going to be a good show. Real quick, I just want to share something. I had an opportunity yesterday got invited to a friend of mine who I went to college with. We went to the same college, and they had a draft party, an NFL draft party, for his son who just was drafted to the Green Bay Packers. So I want to give a shout out to John Brown and his family and his son, Equianus St. Brown. And I believe this kid is going to have a phenomenal future first of all, in the National Football League and for the Green Bay Packers. So, on that note, as we move forward, like I always like to give another great thanks to my family, my wife, my kids, and all those loved ones and the ministry and the people that I'm involved with, because it's all of them who give me the opportunity to reach out, to do the work that I do, to help impact the lives of others. So, thank you to all my family. Well, our guest today, Danny Sales, is the National Director of Sales. No, National Director of Safe Families for Children at Olive Crest. He has been working with Safe Families for Children since 2010 and has had the privilege of watching the SFFC, which is Safe Families for Children, program grow at Olive Crest for over 8 years. Danny currently oversees FFFC Olive Crest programs in Orange County, San Diego, Los Angeles, the Inland Empire, Coachella, Las Vegas, Seattle/Tacoma, and Spokane, Washington. Danny's background is in counseling psychology and ministry. He came to Olive Crest after serving 12 years in church ministry, most recently having been on staff, pastoral staff, with Saddleback Church, which is, for those you who don't know, Saddleback, and that would be the senior pastor, Rick Warren. And you might know his book, Purpose Driven Life. So Danny's undergrad work was completed at Milgram College in Tennessee, and he has participated in graduate coursework in both social work and ministry at Southern Illinois University and Hope International University. So today, we welcome Danny to Answers for the Family. Danny, how are you? You there?
I'm doing well. Yes, I'm here, and thank you so much for having me.
Hey, well, let me ask you a question real quick. Did I miss anything on the intros? Anything else we need to add? Because sometimes there's some things there we might not have was able to share. Anything that you want to add to that?
No, I really appreciate that introduction, and I think if anything got added to that, it would be just way over the top. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share some time with the listening audience, and any opportunity I get to tell others about the good work of Safe Families for Children across the country. That's a good day for me, so I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, well, that's okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it myself, and as we might say, here we go. So, first question, Danny, I have for you. When was Safe Families for Children started?
Yeah, that's a great question. In 2000, late 2002, 2003, Safe Families for Children started in the Chicago area with an agency called Lydia Homes. And Lydia Homes is an agency that has existed in Greater Chicago for a number of years, 50-plus years, I believe, a long time. It's an agency that has done a lot of really good work with the local child welfare system there, and doing through programs such as foster care and adoption programs and other programs to work with kids and families who have found themselves in touch with and kind of involved in the child welfare system, kind of having come through the courts and been deemed as a family that really needs to have some intensive services provided in order to protect the children in that family and equip the parents in a way that they're able to care for their kids safely. So Safe Families for Children started with that agency, and it's okay, I'll just share a quick story about how it started and why it started.
Okay, well, because as a matter of fact, my next question was going to be with, how did it start? And, what is Safe Families for Children? And let me, real quick, as you start to go forward, as I am listening and thinking through this process, and when I hear, a lot of times, if, my undergrad is psychology, and, a lot of times, life is framed by words and emotions and what those are attached to. And, when I think of social services, it's not something I always think of as a very positive fashion. I mean, it's a system, and a lot of times systems don't serve people well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And really, Safe Families in its early days was a little bit of a response to that reality, recognizing that systems oftentimes don't have the interest of the individual as a primary concern, and instead really the system becomes the concern. So we know that the child welfare system all across the country, programs like foster care and such, really everywhere you look, there's a bit of a broken system in that the outcomes of such a system and a lot of the things that you look at in regards to measuring the effectiveness of a system like that just show us that it's a system that really should be considered for a family as a very last resort, and that there should be a lot of effort and a lot of energy and opportunities put forth prior to looking to that system as the answer to a family's problem.
Which is good. And I, having a background in counseling and services, one thing I realized too that which I really like what you guys are doing as far as with Safe Families is, it's almost like we use the term in the industry, wraparound services. It's some, the intention of social services was meant for one thing, but unfortunately it gets over inundated and it becomes a very bureaucratic system. So when you start looking at having these wraparound services in support, it makes a difference in the world. And I love what you said when you use the word response versus reacting, because a lot of times what happens, we're in a crisis, we react instead of taking a step back and looking at properly responding to the situation at hand, which gives us a better look, a better outcome in the process.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's, Safe Families started really as a little bit of a reaction to, or a response to the years of negative outcomes that we've been recognizing from government systems that are designed to intervene in families in crisis, and in practice don't necessarily end up giving families opportunities to work through that system well, where they end up on the other side of that having experienced a lot of hope and help and healing, and instead there are a number of broken families and situations where families just have a very difficult time moving to a place of health because of those systems. And so Safe Families really started as a response to that. It's a really interesting story I'll share with you. The founder of Safe Families, his name is Dr. David Anderson, and he's the CEO of Lydia Homes and Safe Families for Children. He
which is based out of Chicago, right?
Yeah, in Chicago.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. Tells the story of just having a repeated experience of showing up to his agency, Lydia Homes, every day for work and kind of checking in for work and just this repeated experience of people showing up at the agency there asking for help. And by and large, a lot of young single mothers with small children who were struggling in the community, and his agency had developed a reputation in the community as a place that families that were struggling get help. And so these young moms would, somebody would say, well, you're having a hard time, go to that place and they'll help you. And these young moms would show up there, and unfortunately, Dr. Anderson tells the story that the majority, if not all of the services that they offered at Lydia Homes were for families that were already involved in the system. So programs like foster care and adoption and so on and so forth. And he said he just had this repeated experience of meeting these young mothers who were really struggling with maybe just securing stable housing, or they were struggling with just getting their feet under them and being able to afford rent, or being able to maybe they had developed an addiction issue over the years and they wanted to get treatment for that addiction. But they weren't abusing their children. They didn't need the system to step in and take their kids away from them, but they needed to access some services that would help them stabilize and be a good, strong parent for their own kids. And so just have this repeated experience of these mothers showing up at the agency and asking for help, someone telling them to go there to get some help. And they just would have to repeatedly tell these ladies that he didn't have anything to offer them, that as an agency, their services were all designed for after the problems had occurred. Kind of a reactive mindset of dealing with families in crisis, more so than a proactive mindset.
Well, and the term,
and he said,
and the term I use in that too, Danny, is the fact would be, intervention versus prevention. After the fact,
Exactly.
we're talking about intervention. Before the fact, we're talking about prevention. Is what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he tells the story just to him, it felt like he was saying to these mothers, once things get worse, then I'll be able to help you. And his growing
Wow.
discomfort with that, as a believer and as just a concerned citizen in the community, but also as somebody who's a believer, being able to be able to help and to offer help and hope in times of need versus saying, when things get worse, then I'll help you. And so he tells the story of going to work one day, and sure enough, another young mom with her kids was there, and he said, I just knew it was a different day. I knew I couldn't say that. I couldn't look at this young mom again and say to her, come back and see me when things get worse, and then I'll help you.
Wow.
And he said, I just knew today was different. And so they sat on the front steps of the agency and mapped out a little plan of how they were going to care for her child so that she could go check into a rehab center and get some treatment that she needed to get, and mapped it out on a napkin and drew up an agreement between his family and her family and said, we'll take good care of your baby while you get the help that you need, and you don't have to lose your child to foster care for the next few years. But instead, take the 30 days or the 60 days that you need to go get the professional help that you need, and your baby will be well taken care of, and you can focus on getting stable for your child.
Yes.
And so he went home that day with that child and walked in the house, and his wife looked at him and looked at the baby and looked at him and said, Dave, what's happening? And as you can imagine, the shock on her face when he walks in with a small child. And so they discussed what the circumstances of that were, and she said, but I don't understand, Dave. You're the CEO of an agency. You run a big agency. I'm a healthcare provider and work a full-time job as well. How are we gonna take care of a baby? And he said, honey, I don't know, but we've got a church full of people that can help us. So let's get on the phone and let's call our church and let's ask for help. And that really was the birthplace of Safe Families for Children. That was that was when this model of engaging faith communities, churches in the community to get organized and to be purposeful about reaching out to their neighbors and connecting with these families who are really struggling, oftentimes young single moms, and offering the community of the church to these moms, and then watching the hope that blossoms in those moments in that community, watching that hope take root in her life and begin to make changes. That's what Safe Families for Children is all about.
Wow. Wow, it's good work. As I'm listening to you tell the story, in my own mind, as a believer as well, I'm just always reminded of the goodness, that there's hope, there's a God. And when I say that from the standpoint, a loving God, and it's these kind of acts of humanity that are really the things that change the fabric of our communities. And
that's exactly right.
And there's so much need. There's so much need that's out there. And a lot of times we get to this point where we don't think Dr. Anderson was saying, and he goes home with a baby and his wife, and they're two active professionals, and how are they going to keep a kid? But look where the program is at today, just from that single act. Now, if there's not a God, exactly. I don't know what to say. I know I can't be preaching on the show here, but I just get a little excited.
Yeah, and to that point, what I should mention is that that was the birthplace of Safe Families. About 7 years later, those of us here in Southern California learned about Safe Families for Children and kind of approached Dr. Anderson and that agency and said, we want to bring that to Southern California. And then as a result of those conversations, the program has taken off nationally. And
wow.
Today we are operating in about 110 cities across the United States, also in Canada and the United Kingdom. And over 40,000 kids have found a safe place in families from local churches when their families are going through tough times. The local church has stepped forward and said, let's provide care and compassion and to this family in our community that's struggling so that they don't have to enter this big government system and kind of get lost in the system and end up, not being able to find the stability that they need.
Yes.
And so over 40,000 times over the past
Wow.
15 years, we've been able to see that happen. And as you said, it all started from one person saying yes to that and sensing the Holy Spirit kind of moving in their lives and calling their church community to action in that, and the church saying yes. And as a result, today, 40,000 children have had that, and there are over 2,000 churches across the U.S. that are that have teams of volunteers and Safe Families for Children at their churches.
Wow, that's man, that's such great work. I'm going to say something, Danny, and I've never been one to kind of walk away from saying things that may be controversial, but it's the right thing to say. And I just believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that honestly, the church of the 21st century in America, if they would step up and step out and do what they've been called to do according to the word, I believe some of the things that we're dealing with, the atrocities that we see in America, would not be happening. And we would continue to be a model for the world of how to have compassion and care for those around us, for humanity and mankind. I could say I've been ordained. I've been involved in the church for over 30 years, large church, small church, and I'm at a point where I have a home church and do a lot of work with millennials and Gen Z at this point, who have basically walked away from the traditional church because they're tired of being entertained. And so I don't know. Let me go back. I'm hopeful that we can start as a body, become reconnected to the works of humanity.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about kind of the this current generation that really is stepping into leadership of the church, and also really, in the pews of our church, in the rows of our churches, they are kind of itching and
yes.
and pressing the church to be more, and that more that they talk about is that they want to see action. They want to be behind
Yes.
the words, and they want to be given that opportunity, and they want to follow leaders who have action behind their words. And so there's
Yes.
there's a sense, I think, a growing sense of discontent with kind of just the church that just talks about the goodness of God and talks about the hope of heaven, and there's an attraction to those churches and those leaders who are leading the church in a way where the goodness of God is on display in the action of the church, and the hope of heaven is something that you begin to catch glimpses of
Yes.
in the everyday life of those that are sacrificially kind of living out a life of obedience to God. Heaven starts to show up in those moments. I think about, we talk about the work of Safe Families oftentimes as a work of hospitality. It is, and I can unpack that a little bit, but it's the work of loving the stranger in your home.
Yes.
And the Bible makes it very clear that when we practice hospitality, it says that you'll end up entertaining angels without knowing it. There's this supernatural kind of amazing thing that happens when God begins to make himself known in the midst of that. And that is the work of Safe Families. The volunteers of Safe Families will tell you without a shadow of a doubt that they are exposed to some pretty miraculous, amazing, powerful,
Yes.
life-changing, community-changing moments as they do the work of loving their neighbor.
Yes. It's a principle.
Sometimes we make our faith and living it out pretty complicated, and when you boil it down and you think about, love God, love others, love my neighbor.
Love thy neighbor.
And,
Yes.
when we live that out, it's a pretty powerful thing.
You're right. I mean, it's really it's a little more simple than it sometimes it's made out to be. And one of the things I hear
That's right.
from our group, millennials and Gen Z's that they say, I want to see the stuff that I read in the Bible. I want to, the power. I want to be part of that kind of work. I don't want to just talk about it. I want to see it.
Yeah.
If he's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore, then it should be happening today. And why is it not? You go, okay. So I look at the work that's going on, as far as with Safe Families. That's part of that work. I mean, that body of work, stepping into it, watching the supernatural happen. And ultimately, it empowers people and changes lives. It's a supernatural empowerment. Great. And the other thing I look at, too, is otherwise, if we don't do something, Danny, we end up having broken families. And you know what happens when you have broken families and there's no opportunity for healing? Then they, at some point, these young kids, they grow up to be adults. And what do? They repeat the cycle because they don't have anything different. And what do? They have broken families. And it continues and continues and continues. And the moral values and decay of our communities and country is declining. But that's a whole other subject matter too, according to the Word of God. But talking about the end times. But
well, and if I could offer something with that as well, what I would mention with that is that you're exactly right. I think we're called to do something, but I think what I get excited about with the work of Safe Families is that the something that we're called to do. Not only can everybody do it, but it also just so happens to be the very thing that is exactly what is needed. So we kind of simplify and we say, well, we'll just do something, Well, the interesting thing is if you really unpack Scripture and you start to think about, well, what is the something I'm supposed to do? There's this, and we look at the life of Christ and we begin to follow after him and think, okay, so Jesus, lived his life as a perfect example of how we're supposed to live ours. So what do I learn from that? We see these examples over and over and over in the life of Christ of him engaging the stranger, acting on behalf of the stranger, moving out in actions of love on behalf of the stranger. And when I say stranger, what I'm talking about is not just because I haven't met somebody before. It's that person in my community whose life is very different than mine, whose worldview, whose way of understanding the world, making decisions, all of that stuff is very different than mine, oftentimes in contrast to mine.
Yes.
It's in Scripture, it's the tax collector, Zacchaeus, that Jesus goes into that community, and who does he befriend? Zacchaeus. Yes. And he goes and has dinner at his home. And what we know of the tax collector is that he was a cheat. He was a thief.
Yep.
His worldview, his way of making decisions and what was right and wrong, very different than Jesus's, right?
Yes.
But that's who he went to. And so we follow that example, we go and we connect with those in our community who are different than us, those who we don't know, those whose lives are different than ours, and we move out in actions of love on their behalf. Yes. And in Scripture, it talks about hospitality happening in the home. So we do all of that in our homes. That's some pretty powerful stuff. And the interesting thing is that when there's a lot of research out there today. You've got a background in social work and ministry as well, and there's all kinds of studies and organizations and universities and stuff that are just really looking at this thing of child abuse in our community, and how do we and families falling apart in our community and entering the child welfare system and so on and so forth, and what can we do about that? And for years we have watched just large expensive systems be developed. We watched trillions of dollars be spent on programs to address issues like low income or family, like counseling programs and housing programs and all of this kind of stuff that are around families in crisis. And
it's failing.
And and they're failing. And child abuse rates and broken family rates are going up in every community as a result. And so the interesting thing is the latest research is telling us that the single most significant contributing factor to an episode of child abuse and a child coming into the child welfare system, the number one thing that pushes a family over that edge where a child enters the child welfare system is isolation. And so I think to myself, if isolation is the number one problem to a family falling apart to the point that a child has to come into the child welfare system, isolation is the number one reason, then relationship is the answer to that.
Yep.
Right?
You hit the nail on the head.
If isolation is the problem, then connectedness and community is the answer, and which is relationship. And if relationship and connected and community is the answer, tell me one organization in our communities that is better equipped, more called, better challenged, like more aligned with that mission than the church.
Than the church. Exactly.
There's nobody out there that is better equipped and better positioned to do the work of relationship than the local church.
Well, let me add.
And in doing that work, kids are kept safe.
Yes, it's interesting. Let me add to that, Danny, because as I was reading some other, I love statistics and numbers, and they at least they give you. It's not an end all, a catch all, but it gives you a direction of how things may be trending. And the whole thing about isolation. Well, here's some more caveat to that. When we start to look at these shooters that have gone into the schools, when we start to look at some of these heinous crimes that have happened here recently in our country, it's going back to that which you just shared, isolation.
That's right.
Isolation. Every profile of every individual, they show that they were isolated. It's been this isolation of this living environment. So if you take away isolation and they have relationships, and that's why when you look at, for me, as we walk with Christ, it's active, it's engagement, it's relational.
Yes.
So if we pull away from what I call the Father, what it was from the beginning, we've gotten away from the design of what was meant, that was walked out for us. And we started to have and see the things that we're seeing, and which you so eloquently touched on in the research.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think, the simplicity of that message is what is so interesting to me. There's that just by living our lives a little differently in regards to being aware and a thoughtfulness towards our community, to those in my neighborhood that might be struggling, that just by doing that, I get to live out my faith in a new, refreshing way that is really powerful, and B, my whole neighborhood begins to change as a result. It's really pretty amazing.
Yes, it is. It is, and
that I could just take a second too to kind of draw that line to Safe Families for Children. That is the real nuts and bolts of what we're asking people to do when we speak with a leader in a church or a leader, pastor invites us to come and share about Safe Families for Children at their church. Specifically, what we're asking is we want to help that local church create a team of volunteers in their church that will live out biblical hospitality. There will be some volunteers on that team that will open their home and invite children to come live with them when their family is going through a tough time. There will be some volunteers on that team that will show up for that host family, and they'll help donate some resources to make that possible. They'll drop off a gift card for a restaurant so they can feed the family that night. They'll drop off some diapers or some wipes or something like that for a family that's hosting a little baby. Or they will come by and offer to tutor that school-age child who's fallen behind in school and is getting hosted by a Safe Family, so that they can help get his grades back up. There's also, and by organizing the manpower of the church in this way around a singular mission of drawing those in our community that are isolated into the communities of our church, what we see is that these kids and these families, their families aren't necessarily all fixed in 30 days.
No.
Some of the problems, the challenges that they're facing are challenges that have been going on for generations, as you mentioned earlier, that cycle that carries on. But that 30 days that child stays with a safe family can be the foundation of some relationship where that family begins to see that local church in the community as a safe place. And they begin to start to heal, and there's kind of a new whisper of hope in their lives that things can be different. And in the context of community, the the giant of a problem that they had been solving, or that they had been facing all alone previously, in the context of community, starts to be knocked down to size, and it starts to be manageable, and we can do this.
Yes.
Kind of an attitude starts to emerge, and in those moments, that's when the risk of abuse and the risk of danger and the risk of being taken away from their family for these children that are at risk, that risk is significantly reduced in the context of the communities of our church.
Yes, and I mean, if you could see me, Danny, I got a big smile on my face, because this is what I call truly relational, truly being a servant, truly doing the work of Christ. I mean, this is, and I can recall, as a child, where the church was the pillar. It was the foundation of the community. It was in the middle of the community. And somewhere we got real smart and started wanting to move out to the outskirts of the city and buy these big buildings. And all of a sudden we took the church out of the community, and it turned into something we couldn't, before it was, you could see hope in the community. If something was going on, you could run locally and go at any time of the day and reach out.
That's right.
I remember, and you could actually actively catch somebody there without capturing voicemail, or somebody would get back.
Yeah.
I mean, there was always that sense of that safety net, which helped to me, was a fabric of keeping communities together. And in what you're sharing, this whole thing with Safe Families, it's really, lack of a better word, is kind of bringing that formation back in alignment to what I believe we have kind of walked away from.
I think so too. I think there is a piece of this. I had a pastor that shared with me the other day, his love for Safe Families really centers around, and then Safe Families ministry in his church, he really loves so much what's happening there, and the reason why is he said it's corrective for us as a church. This is a corrective thing it's redirecting us back in the alignment of Jesus. Where I think about this thing of the stranger, this stranger piece of biblical hospitality, and this call on our lives to connect with and build relationship and do life in a way that causes us to intersect with those that aren't like us. And that is, if I'm real honest, and I grew up a pastor's kid and pastored in churches, you mentioned that, for about 12 years or so before coming to work with Safe Families. And if I'm real honest, many of the churches I've been a part of don't value that stranger piece very much. We value gathering together with those that are like us.
Right.
Those who think like us, who agree with our political view, they agree with our view of God, they agree with how we spend our money. They there's not a lot of challenge to our lifestyles in our churches. As long as it's not murdering people and saying dirty words and getting drunk too often, then we're good to go.
Right.
And our churches, we love to, and I even grew up, I always tell the story, I grew up as a pastor's kid thinking that was hospitality, that we had a hospitality committee at our church, and the hospitality committee's job was to fix pies and coffee for the Sunday night Bible study, where all the Christian families came together and had pie and coffee before Bible study. And that was hospitality.
Well,
and little did I know
yes,
that the Bible defines hospitality very differently.
Yes.
Hospitality, according to the Bible, is go to the stranger. Go to that person who lives their life very differently than you do, and engage in a relationship with them. And not just any relationship, but a relationship that's defined by sacrificial love.
Yes.
Do that and see what Jesus does in your life.
Yep.
See what Jesus does in your church.
Yep.
And it's just unbelievable.
Well, I'm going to say this is short, and I can't believe how fast the time had just ran away from us. It's like, man, I'm like, Jiminy Cricket. But so anyway, and I'm going to say this real quick, and then we're going to take a little commercial break real quick, and then kind of get back and close out the show for the last 10 minutes. But In accordance with what you're just sharing, that whole thing about hospitality. I mean, if we read the Bible, we have this in front of us, and we think about it. See, the church, Jesus wasn't hanging out with the religious folks because he was very relational.
That's right.
It's the same thing we see today was happening then. And what did he do? When we look at the disciples, he didn't go to the church. He chose people that were very much different. And I always say it was a revolution when he went to these, down to the shores, and he got the fishermen. And he says, I think about back in those days, he was a disruptor. Like we have technology today that just changes how we see and do work, right? Well, that's what he was as a person. And he, I was telling some youngsters, he went down and says, hey, throw down your nets and follow me, and I'll make you fishermen. Now I told somebody, I said, well, think about it, though, how crazy that was. Because, first of all, if my wife would have said, you're going to do what? Throw down your nets? Well, that's how we make a living. That's how we eat and make you fisher of men. I can't eat men. So something was so radical in the message that they threw down their nets to follow. And in the process of following, walking with, they saw transformation happen time and time again, to the point he says, now that you've seen it, do it until the end of the world. So that transformative power is still alive for those who want to walk in it and get out of their comfort zone. So we're going to take a commercial break real quick, and Danny, we're going to get back and close out this session. And this is a great show.
Thank you. Okay.
Founded over 30 years ago to meet the needs of families in crisis, West Shield has continually focused on resolving issues that negatively impact families and businesses. Our signature therapeutic transportation service helps to ensure that adolescents in crisis are safely transported to specialized schools, programs, and treatment centers with unsurpassed experience and success. We are supported by our full-service licensed investigation agency that has legally, professionally, and compassionately located hundreds of runaways and teens. We are experienced and qualified to help, offering solutions which may include referrals to our international network of top professionals in the fields of educational consulting, psychology, psychiatry, and investigations. Simply put, West Shield Adolescent Services and West Shield Investigations are the best solutions when your family is facing a personal crisis. Call 1-800-899-8585. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's 1-800-899-8585. Or visit our website at westshield.com. Thank you.
Well, we are back to close out our show with Danny Sells, the National Director of Safe Families for Children at Olive Crest. And he's just doing amazing work. So, Danny, the time just flew by. It just flew by. But
it sure did.
Yes, but it was good. I think I believe what was shared today, I think it was a transformative message. I believe in the words that came forward, that they were words outside of us. And I believe those who are listening to this show, that something's going to penetrate their heart. And I believe that there's going to be more who are going to be calling, looking out to safe families as a way for the church to get involved. I believe. So anyway, on that note,
amen.
Why don't we take I had a calling guest, and let me get this in, and then some closing notes, comments from you. And we're down, we got 7 minutes. Oh my gosh. So it was so very exciting to read about your organization. I grew up in a foster care from the age of 8. Although the families I was placed with were kind to me, I was never allowed to contact my mother until I turned 18. We missed all those years because of my stepdad's alcohol addiction and abusive behavior. The healing between all of us has been long overdue because of a system that could not help us overcome our challenges. That's Marianne out of Baltimore. So here we go, Danny.
Wow.
There's something else, sharing that same sentiment about what we're talking about, the system.
That's right.
And one last one. Here's another one just came in. It says, number 2, it says, I am a social worker in LA, and I have never heard of your program. Is there anything underway in a referral type situation to connect our organizations with yours? If not, what are the obstacles, and is there anything we can do from our side of the equation? I am a member of the National Association of Social Workers. Are you in contact or working with them in any way? And that is Mark A. Okay.
Great. Yeah. Well, I'd love to answer that. We are doing some work with the National Association of Social Workers and also the National Association of Christian Social Workers, and in contact with them and kind of seen a lot of exciting momentum, I would say, across the country. Really just obviously we want to see the momentum in regards to local churches and that base of volunteers and teams of volunteers in local churches that will step forward and do the actual work, the operational work of caring for these kids and families. But it's really neat to see when churches do this, local communities begin to recognize the local church as not just a place where some good religious activity happens,
yes,
but they start to really recognize the power and the impact that can be made through a local church that is actively living out the mission of safe families in their community. And they start to invite them to the table to say, hey, our community is struggling with this issue or that issue. In Spokane, you mentioned Spokane earlier, that I oversee
yes,
that area. I was there the other day, and they have been meeting together with community leaders and civic leaders and all kinds of different people coming to the table just saying, our community is struggling as a whole, and there's a lot of different issues, but what do we want to do as a community? What do we want to tackle? And this issue of fatherlessness in their community has really risen to the surface in an interesting way, because I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but the community of Spokane, Washington is actually the birthplace of the holiday of Father's Day. And so as a community, they've become very concerned that this birthplace of Father's Day has become really a hotbed of
fatherlessness,
of family dysfunction in a way where kids in the community are living without fathers all over the place. And so they want to address that, and they've identified churches that are living out the mission of the gospel, that are living out the gospel through Safe Families for Children as their allies in this. And they're saying, this is a ministry in local churches that can help us address this issue of fatherlessness.
Wow.
So I say all that to say exciting momentum across the country in all those communities, getting calls all the time in more communities saying, I want to be a part of this. In regards to the gentleman that asked the question in Los Angeles, he absolutely can go to our website at safe-families.org and look up the Los Angeles region and find the contact information I can mention. 1-800-550-CHILD, extension 1234. You can call that anytime and make a referral to the program. And we have probably about 30 or 40 churches in LA that we're working with, and that's growing all the time.
Well, that's great, great.
So, yeah, we're ready to step forward and help in really tangible ways.
Well, Danny, I want to thank you because that was a great closing note. Give that phone number one more time.
Yeah, the phone number, if you'd like to connect with Safe Families in Southern California, is 1-800-550-CHILD, extension 1234.
Well, Danny,
1-800-550-CHILD, 1234.
We want to thank you as we're closing out the show, that we stay on time here. Appreciate you much. Keep you lifted in prayers as you do what we're doing here at Answers for the Family. And want to close out on this note. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you so much.
Wow, great show. Great show. And that was Danny Sells, the National Director for Safe Families for Children at Olive Crest. Well, please be sure to put on your calendar and tune in next Monday when our guest will be Dr. John DeWitt, who's a former NFL guy who's doing a lot of great work. I was on a show with him prior to discuss current stem cell research and arthritis relief. The future is now. So tune in. Please tune in next week. And then please visit our archives, the archive of our past interviews for Answers at the Family, answersforthefamily.com, or subscribe to our show through iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or Vimeo. If you like what you hear, please leave a review. It will help us reach more people and be greatly appreciated. And the next time you're on Facebook or Twitter, please remember to stop by our page and check out some of the latest posts. And if you like them, please like us and spread the good word. Once again, this was Answers for the Family, and I was your host today, Marvin Smith.
You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza, right here on LA Talk Radio.